Hi guys, well today's video is on the Shang Dynasty. The Shang Dynasty lasted from 1750 BC to 127 BC, and what that means is that this was in our timeline, the way we've done in class before, was before zero. So this was about 3,000 to about 3,500 years ago. So it was a very, very long time. If you look at the map over here, so here we have the country of China and the Shang Dynasty. This is how big it ran. So it's not like here in the US where we have specific states and they have borderlines and they stay within those borderlines. Dynasties, they took over large pieces of land, and kind of like the more they took over, the bigger land they had. So China's first documented dynasty is the Shang Dynasty. And what they mean by documented means that they left trails or they left something behind to show that they existed. So there's nothing that shows that there was a previous dynasty before the Shang Dynasty. Possessing advanced bronze weapons. So they were very, very famous for their bronze weapons. The Shang conquered most of the tribes along the Yellow River and formed a feudal kingdom. So if you look here, there's a little line that runs across or through the Shang dynasty picture there, and that is the Yellow River. So they took over a lot of the tribes that formed within that river. They collected tribute from the people of the region. Tribute are kind of like gifts as a matter of respect, something that they kind of just turn into them as a tribute. I don't quite know if those tributes were optional. I feel like when they took over different tribes, they kind of were first forced to give something in as a form of respect. The Shang are generally considered the first great Chinese civilization. So let's continue. They had a writing system, just like we have a writing system. We have the alphabet. Each letter has a sound. You put, those letters together. They make words that represent things. They had character writing, which means that each symbol represented either a sound, a word, or an object. So if we remember thinking back at Egypt, a lot of their figures, they represented symbols. So there was like a bird, or the lines were like air or water. So each thing represented kind of like something. Our symbols represent letters or sounds. So this right here, these are examples of the type of writing system that the Shang Dynasty had. We write on paper or we type, whether it's on phones or computers. Egypt, they wrote on papyrus, and they started writing system on oracle bones, which is, it's a bone. They were used for fortune telling, so that's what it mentions here. I'm pretty sure that they used their writing system for more than fortune telling, but this is what it is here. So they used to write on bone. Cities, Anyang, the last capital of the Shang Dynasty, is the most famous of its cities. They had advanced technology. So like we mentioned before, they had bronze metalwork, silk weaving, complex pottery, and monumental architecture. So in addition to like metalwork, their silk, their fabric, they made pottery. We've seen pictures or images in the videos before of some of the pottery examples that they had. And architecture has to do with like the buildings or the bridges or the columns, so things that they see in like famous places. I know that there's some places that have really beautiful architecture. The White House is built a certain way. The Lincoln Memorial is really famous for those columns as well. Social classes. So this is one of the things that we've talked about before. I remember, I believe it was the Egyptian as well. I keep talking about them because they were, around the same time as well, if not just a little bit before this. So they had three social classes. I think the Egyptians, they had about 5, if I remember correctly. So nobilities is at the very top, which of course government officials and priests. They have no, what is it? No pharaoh. So that's the difference. So they don't have a pharaoh in here. Commoners were like, I want to say like the basic people, the artisans, the farmers, the merchants. That was in the middle class. And then at the very bottom, which of course is always at the bottom, they had the slaves. So if you notice this picture right here, I think I'm kind of in the way. Oh, well, look, I can move me. I didn't know I can move me. Whoops. So down here, we have the triangle. And we've seen that triangle before. The bigger it is, which is at the bottom, the more people fall into that category. So there were a lot more slaves than there were artisans and farmers, and there were more farmers than there were noble priests. So this is an example here. I don't quite know if that is metal. I believe it is, and that's one of the things that they were very famous for. They're very famous for their metal work. So the type of government that they had is they had a king. So that's what it says here, but they're more known for the title of emperor. The king led government from the capital. So they had one location where that's where the emperor or the king kind of lived and ruled from. However, if you remember the map that we looked up for the Shang Dynasty, where is it? This one here. If you have just one city or one place where the king is ruling, you would have one dot. So how does an emperor from one place rule such a big piece of land? So because of how big their property was, they had relatives. So their brothers, their cousins, most likely men. I don't think they had female rulers. As we've seen before, women at this time, they don't have a lot of power. So the king's relatives, the people who were part of his family, they ruled the other cities in his name. So they didn't rule saying that, oh, I'm king or I'm the emperor. They're ruling and they're taking over, or they're kind of protecting and making sure that everything's okay in other cities, but the ruler is their king. Based on the religion, there are 2 words that we have practiced and gone over. One of them is monotheism, and one of them is polytheism. So take a minute and try to see if you remember what those words mean. One of them, I'm going to let you think for a little first, but one of them means that you only believe in one God. And the other one means that you believe in many gods. So take a second, really think about which one is what. So we have monotheism and we have polytheism. So think about that real quick. If you need to pause me, you can pause me. But they were polytheistic, which means they were based on, here it says nature, spirits, and ancestor worship. Polytheism means that they believed in more than one god. And in addition to nature spirits, which were their gods, they had and worshipped ancestors. And I know that I mentioned the movie Mulan before, so they pray to their ancestors to give them guidance or to watch over them. So it's not just I believe in one, like I believe in gods. I believe in the people who came before me, who are part of my family, who that look and watch over us. Theocratic monarchy. So theocratic monarchy, what this means is that the king did not just rule government-wise. They also led by religion. And that's something that's not very seen. I know in our case here in the US, we don't have a king, of course, we have a president, but the president does not rule over our religion. Our president makes sure that, finances and taxes and like schools and cities and everything is protected and well maintained, but our president cannot tell us what to believe in, what to follow, and have any input on our religion. They did. So they did both. They led government-wise and they led by religion as well. They had very elaborate tombs for kings and nobility. So once again, just like the Egyptians, who the pharaohs, come on, they build their own pyramids for their tombs. So these people, these kings, these emperors, they had very extravagant, elaborate tombs. They weren't quite pyramids, but they were very well preserved. Temples were located in cities and led by priests. So even though the king led by religion, um, the temples they were, excuse me, they were led by, so that's where the priests were. They lived there to help, but just the difference is that their king did lead by it, which means they followed a certain religion that they expected their people to follow as well, which our president cannot do. They don't. It's I think it's a separation of state and religion and God. So that is it for the Shang Dynasty, and tomorrow I will be posting the video for our next one, which is the Zhao Dynasty. So I will see you then.